Hello everyone and welcome back to another book review. Today I am going to be reviewing The Nocebo Effect. This is by Michael H Bernstein, Charlotte Blease, Cosima Locher, and Walter A. Brown. Three of them have PhDs, one of them an MD. So this was a really interesting book that caught my attention right off the shelf because it covers a topic that is similar but not the same as a topic many of us are familiar with. So I'm sure many of us have familiarity with the placebo effect. This occurs normally when there's some sort of clinical study and one group is given the treatment that is being studied and the other group is given an inert substance like a sugar pill, but are being told, or the researchers do not know who is given the real treatment and who isn't given the real treatment. The idea is if the treatment is effective, it's going to produce more of an effect than people just taking a sugar pill. So this is something that happens in clinical studies, and we see that sometimes people can believe that they are taking the real cure, the real substance, the real medicine, when they are actually taking the sugar pill and they show benefits. They show an improvement in symptoms or whatever is being studied. And this is termed the placebo effect because there's an effect which is basically psychological due to believing that you are taking the medicine. You get a positive benefit from your beliefs about the medical treatment that you are undergoing. The nocebo effect, while I have heard it before, is one that I have never seen a book written about, and this is the opposite. So the subtitle here is When Words Make You Sick. And the nocebo effect is when you have negative expectations, primarily regarding things like side effects, but maybe also your ability to get sick or the contagion of something, and therefore you actually physically suffer because of your expectations about the medical treatment. So as the inside of the book cover puts it, the placebo effect's evil twin, the opposite effect of what we're seeing in placebo. And while I think placebo effect has a lot of traction, or it's well known in day-to-day life, nocebo is less well known, and so I was very intrigued to find a book about it, and I decided to give it a read, and I found this book to be absolutely fascinating. I'm going to talk about the format of this book, some parts that I found most interesting, as well as some feedback on the book overall, so you can decide if this is a book that you want to read or a topic that you want to explore more about. The format of this book is short essays, so even though these four people on the cover seem to be leading the charge, there are many contributors to the essays in this book. And the essays are under four different parts. So there's four approaches to, I almost said placebo, nocebo, that are taken in this book. And as the inside flap says, the idea of nocebo effect in medicine, history, culture, psychology, and philosophy are being discussed. So we're discussing a wide range of topics within the broad topic of nocebo. So we do have multiple small essays under four parts. The first part is called The Nocebo Effect in Your Health, and that kind of explains what the nocebo effect is, some common examples or case studies that maybe you are even familiar with to kind of get us warmed up and started. What are we talking about when we talk about the nocebo effect, especially because it's less well known when compared to the placebo effect? Part two is how the nocebo effect works, and this includes a biological perspective and a philosophical perspective. I find that I really liked having multiple perspectives in this book, and I also liked that all of the essays are written by different contributors because we're getting a lot of different perspectives on a topic or from a broad variety of backgrounds on the topic. Part three is what to do about the nocebo effect, and this was more actionable steps, both things that clinicians, doctors, people administering treatment could do, primarily around language that can be done to relieve or eliminate or maybe reduce nocebo, because the nocebo effect does have a very strong negative impact on people's lives. The example that's really given multiple times in this book is people taking statins. So statins are a type of drug that reduce, I think it's blood pressure. It's a common class of drug that I haven't heard of before. And when there are physical, biological mechanisms which could cause side effects in patients. So first, we got to start by saying this isn't just all in the patient's head. There are truly things that can cause side effects, but not everyone is going to get side effects, and not everyone is going to get these same side effects. With statins, when you are aware of the side effects though, you suffer more side effects, and you may decide that the side effects you are suffering are so negative that you would rather stop taking the statin, but stopping taking the statin increases your risk of heart attack or death. And the side effects you were suffering were not going to lead to death. They were just unpleasant. And there's the idea that your behavior or a patient's behavior could be modified to do something like giving up statins from side effects that they only have due to the nocebo effect, due to being aware that they could have these side effects and therefore they experience these side effects. And so what can clinicians and doctors do to prevent this from happening? And this ties a lot into the idea of informed consent, where a patient, when undergoing something risky, has the right to know the risks associated with that procedure, but also balancing the idea that the imposing or the letting the patient know of the risks will possibly, in fact, probably increase their likelihood of experiencing those risks or those side effects. And I'll return to that informed consent / nocebo effect in my personal thoughts of what I found interesting. Part 4 is the bigger picture. So this talks a lot about how the nocebo effect plays in with the media, so the media reporting on certain topics, or public health. So how public health entities and the media play a role in the nocebo effect and how they can perhaps change the way they do things to induce less of a nocebo effect, or at least be aware that, especially the media reporting on certain things in a certain way, could lead to increase in negative experiences for patients or people taking the medicine. The book was filled with very interesting ideas. So those are the 4 main parts, and there's lots of little essays, which I did like the format. I find that I like books when I'm reading. I'm definitely okay sitting down reading a 500-page case-by-case study of a deep topic. There's a time and a place for that, but sometimes a book with short essays is really good because I can read like 2 essays before bed, and then I can put my bookmark in and I'm coming back to the same topic, but I feel like there's a natural stopping point. So I did like the essay format, and I found that there was a ton of interesting ideas in this book. So I'm just going to talk about some of the ones that stood out to me. The first was how much expectations played a role in this. So if you are expecting side effects, you get more side effects. And of course, I was familiar with the placebo effect, where maybe expecting to get benefit from a medicine, you receive a benefit from the medicine. Even though you didn't take the medicine, you took a sugar pill. I had heard of the nocebo effect, but just seeing how powerful the suggestion or the expectation of a patient to experience pain or to experience a negative side effect led to an increase. I also thought this was interesting, and it tied in to the media. That was the last section that was discussed, because sometimes the media, and the authors make a good point, this isn't a desire or a discussion to constrain what the media can report on. But I think sometimes having safeguards in place when you are going to talk about an issue could be a sensible step. And something that was discussed in this book that I think they give us a good example is the media has to talk about very difficult topics that are known to cause some sort of contagion, for example, suicide. There's guidelines, or there's suggestions, or there's ways that you can talk about it to prevent it from spreading, because it's known or it's suspected that it is a contagion sort of idea, where the way you talk about it could induce more thoughts or actions on other people. When a media reports on the negative side effect of, say, statins, and that leads to a large number of people quitting statins or leaving their statins because you hear in the media, so let me back up. Let's pretend the media reports that people experience very negative side effects of taking statins, and you're taking a statin. Previously, maybe you didn't have a side effect, but now you start to attribute maybe something, or you start to experience a side effect because you have this expectation that has been set to you for the media. Then the decision is made by you that maybe you don't want to take statins anymore, so you stop it, and this leads to a fatal heart attack a while later. That is an idea or a situation in which the nocebo effect has had a real negative impact. And something that I think is really important, and this always bothers me when I see media reports doing this, is when a problem is presented with a whole number instead of the actual relative number. What I mean by this is the example given in the book is there's this negative side effect, and they said 200 patients reported this side effect. That 200 patients number is absolutely meaningless if you do not know the total body of people taking the medicine. If 500,000 people are taking a medicine and 200 people report a side effect, it probably is a real side effect of the medication, or it might be a real side effect of the medication, but I wouldn't consider that as worrisome as if 400 people were taking the medicine and 200 people experienced that side effect. That could be something that maybe we look at more closely. And I think it does bother me when, and this is not just medical reports, this is anything, when the media just gives you 40 people did X, Y, and Z without knowing, is that 40 people out of 50 people or 40 people out of 2 million people? So I think knowing the numbers you're working with can be important, and the authors take that into consideration. So it was very interesting to see how much expectations played a role in the nocebo effect and how important it is for clinicians to speak in a way that mitigates those expectations. And this comes to my next point, which was the balancing act between informed consent and the nocebo impact or effect. So we've already talked about how knowing the side effects that could come about leads to expecting worse side effects and then getting worse side effects. But as I've already mentioned in this video, here I'm guessing this is not just in the United States. You as a patient have a right to informed consent, so you have a right to know the risky side effects of what you're going to be consuming or the procedure that you are going to be undergoing. And so that's why the example given in the book, when you have a surgery, you're at risk of bleeding, and there could be a lot of bleeding leading to transfusion and in worst cases, death from loss of blood. Many things can go wrong during surgery, but that's something that you have a right to be informed about. You can't just blithely go in and with the doctors not tell, you can blithely go in, but the doctors have to tell you these things so you can make a decision about what's right for you. And sometimes that decision could be the risks of or the side effects of a procedure are too risky and I would prefer to not pursue this course of treatment. You have a right to that. And this is to combat the mindset that existed in medicine for many years in which patients weren't informed about the severity of their illnesses or the fact that their illness was terminal or the risks that were going to be associated with the procedures that they were undergoing. So and the authors as well agree that informed consent is important for patients to know what they're doing, but it is a balancing act because by engaging in informed consent, you are also opening yourself up to the risk of the nocebo effect. And I think the authors did a really good job of talking about ways that maybe you as a person can mitigate that when reading about side effects. But ultimately, this will tie into some thoughts that I have when I do my overall analysis, because there's definitely clearly a big open area for more research for how patients can maybe both understand the risks of what they're going through without opening themselves up to the nocebo effect. Finally, and this is probably the most interesting topic, which wasn't actually touched extensively in this book, as in it wasn't like 400 pages, the book is only 200 pages, so it's not very long, was pain. And I have read some other books about pain, primarily how it relates to the opioid epidemic that is here in the United States and other places as well, I'm sure. And pain is it's a response, it's a biological response, and it comes from real things, and it has a real important message to indicate. If you break your leg, and I think this example was actually used in this book, the pain signal tells you not to stand on that leg. Don't do this. This is bad, this is causing more damage. Or it can alert you that something's wrong. You've smashed your finger and it hurts 2 days later because maybe there was more additional damage that needs to be rested, avoid strain, or now that we have modern medicine, you should go see a doctor about this. This isn't just a minor incident. Or when you stub your toe, we all have an experience with pain, and pain has a very important part in the world we're in. But there seems to me, in everything that I have read about this, a very clear psychological component to pain. There seems to be a clear indication that different people perceive pain differently, and you can be trained to perceive pain differently and therefore not experience the same level or intensity of pain. And I am probably not using the right words here because I'm clearly not a medical doctor. So if there's a better way to phrase this, maybe someone can correct me in the comments below, but there seems to be a psychological component to this. And that, I feel like when you say that, you run the risk of people saying, well, you saying my pain's all in my head? Well, there's a real component to pain, and pain isn't just made up. We know this. We know that there's a real important function that pain plays, but there seems to also be this clear connection, and I'm very intrigued about this connection, and I wonder if there's a book that just explores the concept of pain. That would make me seem like a very unfun person to be around, and I feel like that's not something you take to the beach for beach reading or on vacation, but I think it would be a very, very fascinating topic. Or maybe there's a podcast I could listen to that explains this topic. The example that was given in this book book that really caught my attention was one in which individuals who, I guess, had something painful happen to them and were on a strong pain reliever, like a drip of it or a automatic administration of it, were divided into two groups. One of them was explicitly told that their pain relief was going to be cut off, and the other one was not informed that their pain relief was going to be cut off. And now that I'm thinking back on it, I don't remember if, I feel like the concept was explained both ways. So I don't know if maybe I'm thinking of two different studies, but the one that was, once they were informed their pain relief was being cut off, their pain got worse. And their pain got worse even when their pain medicine wasn't cut off. So even when they were still receiving the painkiller, they still experienced an increase of pain. And that's really intriguing to me, because if they were getting pain relief before and the group that wasn't told their pain relief was being cut off or stopped didn't experience an increase in pain, but the other group did, it's just a very intriguing prospect and something that I would like to read more about. And this book definitely raised interesting questions about that topic. So those were some of a collection, a variety of interesting topics that I found in this book. This book is full of interesting topics. Overall, it was very interesting. I feel like I use the phrase very interesting to describe a number of the nonfiction books I read. I really need to get more creative with my phrasing, but I feel like maybe I'm just limited with English here. Many of the books I read are very interesting, and this was no exception. I feel like this topic is really ripe for expansion, for more research, more studies, but also more books. When I type in Nocebo effect book, this is the first book that pops up, and it was very difficult for me to find something that wasn't super clinical about the nocebo effect, which tells me that there's a lack of books being written out there, and there's a limited amount of people who are being informed about this topic, at least in like the lay population. So I think there's a lot of room for expansion in this topic, and that means that this book is kind of leading the charge, getting that topic out there for consumers, which I really appreciate it. There's not many books on this topic, and it's one that I was familiar with. So when I heard about it, or when I didn't hear about it, I saw it sitting on the library shelf, I was intrigued and I picked it up. And so the fact that there weren't many books about it, I'd heard about it, and now I wanted to read more about it, all came together and contributed to me getting this. I think there was a risk that this book could have been disjointed because it was written by multiple essays over multiple people over I assume a range of time, and they weren't all sitting in a room together when they wrote these essays, but I think the book was very well edited, so everything flowed together very nicely. And again, I did like the essay format because I felt like I could read it in smaller chunks without losing the flow of the story. As I've already said, I think there's plenty more to write on this topic, and like most nonfiction books, I leave the book having more questions than I started, but it definitely gives me space to go out and seek answers for the questions that I have come up in reading this book. If you have read The Nocebo Effect, please leave your thoughts or comments in the comment section below, or also if you have any thoughts or comments on this, I would love to hear about it in the comments. I love to get your comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.